It's day 4 for me in Townsville with another to come, and it's been an amazing opportunity to listen to locals about the issues that matter to them. And I note that the Premier is now coming next week. I do hope that she takes the issue of youth crime seriously and doesn't just paper over it. It is an opportunity to listen, and if you do, you will hear how much this region is hurting because of a youth crime epidemic that's been 8 years in the making. And good governments are governments that listen and then lead. And I'm urging the Premier, don't just come here and stand in a room and give an address and disappear. Go and listen to people at the ground. Spend a couple of days and listen, and you will hear that it's a very important issue. So too is health. And yesterday we spoke about some of the numbers here locally in Townsville. But across the state, Queensland Health is in crisis. That is now beyond doubt. And the Auditor-General's report has shown as much. And today the Minister said that she's read the report and nothing in that report surprises her. Well, that report says that the Queensland health crisis has been 8 years in the making, and yet still the government cling to the pandemic as the reason for the deterioration in Queensland health. That's not the case. COVID is the added pressure on a system that was already buckling under the strain of poor resources for 8 years. And on every metric, the disintegration of Queensland health has been consistent over 8 years. That's not the fault of the doctors or the nurses or the paramedics. It's the state government that resourced the health system. And we will welcome any opportunity to get more people working in that health system. Advertising is one very small part of that. The biggest thing to turn the Queensland health crisis around is put doctors and nurses back in charge. Make them feel valued. Allow them to train. Allow them to drive the reforms that are needed. At the moment, the Queensland health crisis is leading to good people leaving the system. Let's value the ones that we've got. Let's have world standard training, and let's put doctors and nurses back in charge at the coalface. That's how you'll attract the next generation to Queensland health, and that's how you'll keep the ones who are there already. Fiona might talk a little bit about integrity, and then Jarrod's got something to say about the Olympics.
Thanks very much, David. I want to address the integrity crisis and what is the latest stage of this. The state government is in denial that the changes to the Public Records Act have suddenly come out of the blue from a review of the Act. This state government has now announced that they're going to reform the Public Records Act, and they're denying the real reason for this. This is a mango cube special. This is Mark Bailey, the Transport Minister, who the CCC said was incredibly lucky not to face charges because of a loophole in the law. He was also called foolish by the CCC, no doubt. This was an integrity crisis of a minister trying to hide the fact that he was doing government business offline through private emails and then deliberately actually getting rid of those emails, trying to hide the evidence. The CCC found he was incredibly foolish. The CCC found that he was incredibly lucky not to face charges, and it was only because of a loophole in the laws. It was only because of this minister abusing the law, and we had a former state archivist who spoke out and who paid the price for blowing the whistle on this Labor government's practices. This is a mango cube special of Mark Bailey's making, and the integrity crisis of a government that has become so arrogant they think they can break the rules and get away with it. And the only reason this minister wasn't charged was because of a loophole. This new law will close a loophole, but it doesn't in fact address the fact the government is still in denial about doing wrong quite deliberately. I'll hand over to Jarrod.
Thanks, Fiona. Good morning. Jarrod Bleijie, Deputy Leader of the Opposition. Well, the cat is out of the bag. The federal Labor government are leaking against the state Labor government in terms of Olympic infrastructure. We now know through reports in the Australian today that the federal government was so concerned about Palaszczuk's budget blowouts on the Gabba redevelopment, they didn't fund any of it. The federal government has not put a cent into the Gabba redevelopment, which has blown out from $1 billion 2 years ago to $2.7 billion now. That is a 170% blowout. This government Palaszczuk government has got form with budget blowouts, whether it's Mark Bailey's Coomera Connector, the Cross River Rail blowout. All across Queensland, we are seeing budget blowouts. But more importantly today, we see that the state government now is in technical breach with the agreement they had with the International Olympic Committee. They said when they bid for the 2032 Olympic Games that they would have an Olympic Delivery Authority set up within a short period of time to oversee independently all the infrastructure development. And what have we seen since then? A complete vanity exercise for the Premier herself. She loves the red carpets, she loves the glitz and glamour, she loves everything fun about the Olympics, but she has not done what she promised she would do to the world when she was on the world stage talking about the Olympics. She said she'd have an independent Olympic Delivery Authority. That has not been set up. So the state government is now in technical breach of their obligations and agreement with the International Olympic Committee. Who is paying this? Queenslanders. Queenslanders are now paying the budget blowouts already before we have seen anything planned, evaluated, or even delivered. 170% blowout. And when the Premier and the government are questioned today what the blowout is, rising costs. Ridiculous. Queenslanders know that renovating their homes, yes, there's been increases. Yes, there's been increases in material, but not a 300% increase on an original budget, which we've seen now with the Gabba redevelopment. So that is why the federal government pulled the funding for the Gabba. They did not trust this state Labor government. Their own colour, their own red colour. The federal Labor government doesn't trust Anastasia to be able to deliver this important infrastructure without more budget blowouts. Can we blame them with the history that they have? So I'd say to Anastasia Palaszczuk, Stephen Miles, the Deputy Premier, and Mark Bailey, this is not your fun money, this is not monopoly money. This is Queensland taxpayers' money you are spending on this Olympics. Come up front, set up an independent delivery authority to properly plan and evaluate and deliver the infrastructure needed for a successful 2032 Olympic Games. David.
Lawrence, thank you.
Event today talking about 1,500 health workers overseas hiring. How concerning is it to see that, considering the government's already looking to hire colleagues from overseas as well, and they're often now looking to outsource people from different countries?
The government has to realise that people at the coalface just don't feel valued anymore, and our hospitals are at the pointy end of that. Our health staff feel battered and bruised and broken, and we've got to put them back in charge. That's the way to keep the ones who are there and attract the next generation. It's as though the government believes that that the poor planning is something that isn't affecting staff. Well, of course it is. They're living through it every day. And when I listen to doctors and nurses and allied health professionals, as we got the opportunity to with our Shadow Minister Ros Bates the other day at the hospital, you listen to them and you know how much they love their jobs. They are turning up every day because they just want to serve. And the best way you can get them to stay and to attract the next generation is put them back in charge. Make them feel loved again. That's the change that has to be driven.
And on that as well, if they can't be competitive in terms of local hospitals, also hiring a lot of people internally in Queensland, what's the chance they'll be able to bring a nurse from the UK?
Well, I saw the Minister's comments about locums the other day, and I'm sure they find that highly offensive. But I'm not going to pass running commentary on what Yvette Darth says. What I want to do is say to Queenslanders and those working in the health system, we respect you and we value you. And we know that if we put you back in charge, not only will we heal the Queensland health crisis, but we'll also make them feel like that they're able to do what they need to do. And that isn't what happens at the moment. We have local health boards who are operating with one hand tied behind their back, and we have this centralisation of power. And people in Queensland Health are leaving in droves. We've got to value the ones that we've got. We've got to attract the next generation, allow them to train and be in charge of hospitals, and then you'll start healing the Queensland health crisis.
With the LNP elected, are you looking at hiring workers from overseas or governments?
Well, the first thing we'll do is change the culture of Queensland Health so that doctors and nurses are back in charge. It's also about better resources, better triaging and sharing data in real time. That's the way you change the culture. If you do that, the ones who are there that are leaving in droves, well, the chance of keeping them is improved, And then you look at other options to hire the next generation. We are going to need to hire more doctors, nurses and health professionals. That is beyond doubt. Queensland Health is in crisis because of 8 years of bad planning. So part of it involves keeping the ones who are there. And let's get the training up to standard and let's put them back in charge. And then let's look at how we can attract people to come to the best health system in the world. That's my vision for Queensland Health.
Yes.
Just on the change to the Act, aside from the fact about the Mango Tube saga, is it overdue that these changes happen from a public integrity perspective?
The government's known about this since the former state archivist blew the whistle on the fact that there had been a minister who was deleting emails, the fact that there were government ministers not willing to share the fact that they were doing business offline. So ever since the former state archivist, who paid a heavy price in being criticised and run down and undermined by this government, spoke out, the government has been wasting time. It's urgent that this matter be addressed, but they need to also recognise that the state archivist's role should be independent, should not be undermined by government when they're trying to hide what they're doing in the dark.
On that as well, do you think the government needs to come out and confront this and talk about it more broadly with the public to understand what these changes mean and admit that they got it wrong?
The government does need to admit they got it wrong. They've slipped these changes out very quietly because they know it's a smoking gun for the fact that one of the ministers, a senior minister, was found by the CCC to have acted foolishly, and he only got off the hook because of this loophole. He only got off the hook because of this loophole. He deleted about 700 emails that dealt with government business that he had deliberately done on his private emails so that he hoped they would never be discovered. He deleted those intentionally. And the government's known that. It's extraordinary to have a minister who was found by the CCC, the corruption body, anti-corruption body, found to have been acting foolishly. And it's taken the government this long to act, and they've been very, very quiet about it because they know it all comes back to what happened under Minister Bailey and also their actions when he was found out, because they tried to bag, undermine and destroy the reputation of the former state archivist, who was the one who belled the cat on this.
With the funding issues there with the government, what does it also mean for the Gabba City deal? Is there concerns there that you'll be raising with that?
Absolutely. Well, Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk was asked at a press conference last week, how confident are you that there's not going to be more budget blowouts? And she said she's very confident, but she has a track record of budget blowouts. Everything her government touches blows out. And what I'm more concerned about is the transparency around it. If you have an independent delivery authority to plan, evaluate and deliver the infrastructure, then you can see accountability and transparency and openness with respect to the decisions. What we've now got, though, is a budget blowout of the Gabba from $1 billion to $2.7 billion with no oversight from any independent body. And what's worse is we've now got the Director General of the State Development Department also appointed by the government as the Coordinator General. He will be sending approvals to himself as Coordinator General and back to himself as Director General. It is crazy that the government have not kept their commitment for an independent delivery authority, and we will hold them accountable to that, because this is a lot of money. Queenslanders want a successful games that benefits all Queenslanders across Queensland. This is not monopoly money. It is not the plaything of the Premier. It is more than fun. But at the moment, all Anastasia is doing is looking for photo opportunities, red carpet opportunities, legacy about after the Olympics. We as a team are focused on delivery now.
On that as well, that Townsville City deal was a big issue and that was going on, it's still going on. And there was blame on three different levels of government existing. What do you think is going to happen in Brisbane when three different levels of government are trying to agree on the funding that's trying to go towards this Olympic infrastructure?
Well, look what's happened already. We had the former federal government commit 50% funding. Then the new federal government came in, didn't commit the 50% funding, have pulled out of funding the Gabba redevelopment, which is an additional 8,000 seats after the knockdown and rebuild. The federal government have committed additional funding to Brisbane Live above the Roma Street rail station. So there's funding commitments there from the federal and state government. But also, in terms of redevelopment in density around the Olympic venues, the Lord Mayor of Brisbane, who sits on the Olympic Committee, wasn't even told about the development until he read it in the paper. The government are treating this just as their little plaything. It's not. They have to bring everyone on this journey, because otherwise people will become rightfully sceptical that this is going to be in the interests of all Queenslanders. What we want the government to do is be open, transparent about it, set up the delivery authority so Queenslanders can see where their money is being spent. Thank you, mate. Cheers. Thank you.